All right. Hello and welcome to Healthy Writers, which we named because we couldn't think of another name. I am Kitty Bucholtz, and we'll have everybody introduce themselves because we have a small group. But this is the first time that we're meeting so that we can talk about what apparently is not being talked about nearly enough still, which is perimenopause and menopause and hormones and how it's changing and affecting our lives in ways that either we don't understand and or the people around us don't understand. And I finally started being able to talk about it because my friend Elena said, Kitty, nobody's talking about it. We have to stop being embarrassed and talk about it. So Elena, tell us whatever you
I'm
want.
Elena Dillon, and Kitty and I have been friends for writer friends for many years, and now friends forever too. And that's how we met, was I think it was a writers conference, or
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I always find it so interesting that women don't want to talk about menopause. My closest friends in person, closest friends, just acted like it wasn't happening. And I just thought that was so weird. I was struggling so much with so many things that I didn't really, I mean, I understood on a certain level, but really didn't get exactly what was going on. And I would ask them and they'd be like, oh yeah, it's fine. Yeah, of course it happens, sure. Wait a second.
Yeah.
And my mom passed away a long time ago, so I didn't have a mom to call either. So yeah, so it's great. I think it's really important that we talk about it, that friends and people, just whether women just discuss their issues with it, what's happened to them, so you can feel like you're normal and not crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Because that was the biggest problem that I had, was that I knew you couldn't catch mental illness, and I'm saying this in a funny way for people who, struggle with mental illness. I'm saying it in a funny way to show that, like, I just couldn't figure out what else could possibly be the answer. Like, I was just acting like a fruitcake. I was angry at everybody, pissed off, said really not kind things. I was so not myself. And then when I wasn't doing that, I was depressed. And when I wasn't depressed, I was like on a high anxiety level. And then one day I would wake up and I would be in a great mood. I'd be myself again. I'm like, oh, it's over. And then it would start up again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind.
I remember telling you that I think you're in perimenopause, and you just looked at me like my head had rolled off my shoulders onto the floor.
I grew up in Michigan, where I think that it might be not just my own personal family, but because I also had another friend in Michigan who sweat was just pouring down her face and her shoulders and her neck and her body, and she was clearly having some horrible attack of something. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you okay? And she kind of snapped at me, just ignore it and go back to our conversation. I was like, okay, I don't understand what's going on. And even then because my mom would never talk about these things. My grandmother in a million years would never talk about it. My sister's older than me. She's never given me any clue things would change again. But Margie, you're from Australia. Is Australia different, or are people not?
No, pretty much the same. I mean, I didn't have any role models really or anything to go by, because my mother had a hysterectomy when she was in her early 40s, and she was put on to hormone replacement therapy when she had that, so she never really went through it. She died when she was 85. She was still using her patches, because every time she would try and get off the patches, she'd grow a mustache, and then she'd say, oh no, I can't have that. She was very vain. And so she even like titrated her own dose. She used to cut the patches up in different sizes and try which ones worked without doctor's orders. But she would never really talk about all the symptoms. She just refused to actually accept that she had to have symptoms. So she would take the hormone replacement, and even being a really strict Catholic, hormone replacement therapy was frowned on by a lot of the Catholics in the church, not the priests as much, but a lot of the women, because for some stupid reason, even though you'd had a hysterectomy and you couldn't possibly have children, having hormone replacement therapy was like taking the pill. So um,
Wow.
weird, I know, but yeah, so she never really went through it until she went, as I said, she was still taking the using the patches when she died. My sister, she's 6 years older than me, she had a whole lot of gynecological problems, and she was on hormone treatment for it for a long time. And so she didn't really go through it either, because by the time she went off it, she'd already gone through menopause. So she didn't actually have any of the symptoms. So I was sort of the first person in the family to go through menopause. But I mean, for me, I was lucky. I mean, I had a lot of the symptoms, but being a nurse, it was like, I guess, knowledge is power, and I knew what to expect. I worked in gynecology as well, so I'd seen it. So so whenever a symptom happened, it was like, oh yeah, that's menopause.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like I got the hot flashes.
Yeah.
Like I understood what was happening with some of the other things that were a little less clear. That's what.
Yeah, well, that's right. It's the brain fog that you don't expect. Like you think, yeah, I'm gonna have the hot flushes, you know, and I might have skin changes, and I might need to use lubricant and all of those sort of, you know, personal items and whatever. But yeah, the brain fog is the thing, and the mood changes and all that sort of stuff is something that I don't think a lot of people talk about, and they don't expect. But and you don't get a lot of support from other people, because they just say, oh yeah, that's just them being menopausal. It's like it's this catch-all that sort of explains everything, but it doesn't give you it doesn't help when people do that at all, because, you know, you've got to I mean, it's nice to know that you're not the only person going through it, but if everyone else is like saying, oh, that's normal, they're not actually discussing with you what it feels like to feel that way, which I think you'd sort of yeah.
Normal, it doesn't mean it's okay. Like,
exactly right.
Like, that's great that it's normal and that other people have it, but this does not feel anyway normal or okay.
No, that's right. That's right.
I will say, I know that this is really mean, but this is how I definitely felt when I was reading and trying to figure out, when Elena said, well, it could be perimenopause. So I went online and I Googled things to find out, what is that? What does it mean? What are the symptoms? You know, and how does it last? And do I need to see anybody about it? And so here's the mean part. What I personally found was a whole bunch of articles by clearly middle-aged white male doctors in the US.
Yeah.
Who are all like, oh yeah, these are all the things. That's for sure it. Too bad, but don't worry, it'll go away in 5 or 10 years. I'm like, what?
And that's crap. That's crap, you know. I mean,
you would have already figured out how to fix it.
Yeah. Some people still have symptoms into their 70s. So, you know, I know people that have the hot flushes and the brain fog that persists right up until in their 70s. But then there are other people who are like, oh, I was lucky. Don't you just hate those people?
Yeah,
I was really lucky. I just sort of felt a bit off for about 6 months, and then my period stopped, and then I was fine.
But I think some of those people, some of those people are kidding themselves.
Oh,
They just want you to think they're fine. They live their life like they're fine. And it's not fine. You know, like my big thing was not just the brain fog was a big one, and I sort of I knew that was coming, and it was really unpleasant, and was not happy about it at all. The hot flashes, again, not pleasant, but for me it was the mood swings, because all of a sudden I would just be sad, like, and I've told Kitty this many times, but sad is not really in my emotional repertoire. Like I don't live in that emotion at all. I'm either like happy, perfectly okay, pissed off maybe, but you know, sad, no. I don't, you know, it's just not really and I would just get this overwhelming sadness. It didn't help that, you know, my children were the moving out age, we were going through and I'm thinking, why is this happening now? And, I just remember being very, very confused. And I know, like, I would think one thing and all of a sudden I would just start crying. And I knew it wasn't anything. It wasn't even real. Like, I knew it wasn't real, but I couldn't stop it either. And I remember just my husband looking at me like, what is happening? And I would just say, it's okay. It doesn't have anything to do with you. Just let me, you don't need to react to this or fix it. It's fine. You just stay over here and there, and I'll stay over here and I'll be fine in a little bit, and because he was just like, oh, okay, this is not you. It's not normal. What do I do? So I just thought there's so many things that that you're not prepared for.
Yeah. And I apparently wasn't even prepared enough for that, because I did think that maybe my marriage was falling apart. And then John, however he was reacting made me think that I was probably right. And then, and it wasn't until we finally, one day we never yell at each other. We had like this big fight, and I would be yelling. I did a lot more yelling before I started taking the hormone replacement patches. But we had this big, and I'm like, I don't even think I'm really mad at you. I don't know what's wrong with me. You just stop seeing me being mad. I was just lunatic. And then both of us were like, okay, so this is something else. And then when I finally went to the doctor, that was actually the thing that sent me to the doctor. I was just like, I can't live in this place where I'm angry, sad, whatever on this.
And you don't recognize yourself. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think
you feel like you're somebody completely different.
Yeah. In my case, I had a lot of life changes happen around the same time that I was going through. So moved to another city, away from all of my friends, and most of my kids stayed behind, and we only brought one child with us. And then I started new jobs that were really, I guess, a lot more stressful, a lot longer hours. Like, it was really great for my career, but it was also happening at the same time that my body wasn't really liking it. And it's hard to know whether the long hours or the menopause or whatever, I found that I had great difficulty doing anything other than just go to work. And, I turned into a different person as well, as Kitty was saying. So mostly I was able to hide it, because I was like, I don't want to be that person, and I don't want anyone to see that person. It affected my relationships, and it affected my marriage. And Kitty knows this, but like a year ago, my husband and I were married 45 years, and we separated. And I'm pretty sure that there's multiple factors involved in that, but menopause probably didn't help, as well as that happening at the same time as all these other stresses in your life. I mean, they say that moving to another area is like a grief process. It's as bad as having a death in the family, and all of those sort of things all happened all at the same time. And I think a lot of women go through that. They when they're going through menopause, is around the same time their kids are leaving home, and it's the same time that they're thinking about their own careers that they've never had an opportunity to focus on. And then life gets really busy and stressful, but at the same time you're dealing with all these physical and emotional and hormonal changes. So it's pretty terrible, really, when you think about it. And then you blame yourself when stuff happens that doesn't, that's difficult, and you think, oh, I'm better than this. I should be able to do better than this. Why am I not coping? Why am I not doing these things? And you beat yourself up about it. And with my writing in particular, that just stopped, and that because of all of the stuff that was happening in the background, it just stopped. And then I was like, and as Kitty and I talked about the other day, it's not that you don't want to do it, it's just that you can't do it. but I think one of the most important things that I found really helpful is when I forgave myself and stopped beating myself up, and sort of thought, well, I'll just do it one step at a time, baby steps. And I know that it'll, I'll get back to what I want to do eventually, but I just can't be angry with myself or upset with myself or disappointed with myself when it doesn't happen too quickly.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of women do blame themselves for everything, as you do as a mother and as a woman. One of the most important things is to realize that you're not alone, and there's other people going out there around there with having the same issues. It's not unusual, and you're not. It's so liberating when you realize that it's okay. So
Yeah.
just let it go.
I had a very similar story. So my husband lost his job, and the career he'd had for 30 years, and my kids moved out, and I tell Kitty this story. My son bought a motorcycle, and which freaked me out, and I was going through menopause. Then we moved across the country from California to Tennessee. The writing went right out the window. Peri Menopause was in control of everything. I was, completely, and we started a business. We're in healthcare as well. We take care of the elderly in their homes. And so that I had I was working 80 hours a week, and there's Stephanie. It just was out of control, there was no way I was going to be able to do the writing. It was the thing, and I had to be okay with it. I had to just be like, this is the thing that I just have to be okay with, that I can't do now, and even at this point, I can do some of it, but I have to give myself a lot of grace, because it just, I'm just not able, and I just have to forgive myself and just know that, I'll get to it when I get to it, and that has to be okay.
Yeah.
And the reason why I wanted to start this conversation and do it, live for anybody who, can come, when Elena and I were like, well, probably no one will come at first. So we'll do it at a time that's really convenient for us. So right this second, it's 6 a.m. Well, when we started, it was 6:30 a.m. in the Eastern time zone in the US, 8:30 p.m. in Australia, where Margie is. Well, Stephanie just came on. It's almost 6 a.m. now where she is, and it's almost 1 o'clock in the afternoon in Sweden where I am. But the reason why I wanted to do it is because two things that both happened last month. In addition to me trying to figure out what am I going to do about my life, my health, my writing, my business. I was talking with another writer friend who I thought, because here's another part of not talking about it. I thought that she just didn't want to be friends with me anymore. I thought she was growing out of my friendship, and that she didn't want to be friends with me. She never wanted to talk about writing, and it just felt like we were talking on the surface of things. And then last month she said something that seemed to be sort of a throwaway comment about, I think I said something about hormones and stuff, and she goes, yeah, I totally understand that. I'm just going to give up until it's over. And she kind of laughed, and I was like, oh my gosh, first of all, I had no idea that was the problem. And now I'm thinking maybe it's not me that you don't want to be friends with or something. And second of all, oh my gosh, I am not going to give up my life just because there aren't yet enough medical people or whoever to figure out how to help me solve my problem. I'm not going to give up my life. And then the second thing was, I was talking to a writers group that had about 20 people in it. It was on Zoom, so I'm not sure, but I think probably everybody was a woman in this group, or mostly. And I did this whole hour presentation, and maybe 5 or 10 minutes of it, I was talking about menopause as one of the things that affects your health, which affects your writing, which affects, because I was talking about kind of this whole life way of balancing your writing. And 3/4 of the comments were about, thank you for talking about menopause, from a group of writers who I always think of us as being the people who talk about things because we're the people who write about things.
Yeah.
And I thought I only talked about it for 5 or 10 minutes, and 3/4 of the comments were thanks for talking about it. So I'm like, okay, we need to talk about this more because I don't want anybody to feel alone or that they don't have anyone to talk to or that they can't talk about it or they shouldn't talk about it or that they're just going to give up writing because their brain doesn't work. If there was something that they could do to help them to just write or be happy in whatever way, just a little bit more until and perhaps to have somebody, you know, Margie and Stephanie, I think you guys are on the other side of it now, but to have anybody tell me this won't last forever, although Margie did just say it could last a lot longer than you think. But
well, as I said, you know, it's not everyone, but there are people that are still having symptoms into their 70s.
Yeah.
So,
And it's not all the symptoms either. It's just
No,
certain,
no.
a lot of people I hear.
Often the hot flushes is the main one that some people never get rid of the hot flushes ever.
oh wow.
Yeah.
That will be awful.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the lack of control, I think. That's the hard thing.
Yeah.
So, you just never know when it's going to happen. And you can't stop it. And all of a sudden you're talking and all of a sudden, oh my God, you can feel it starting from inside and it goes, whoop.
I
Or
remember
as I call it, power surge.
I have my friends, they've always called it their own personal summer. And yeah. So I remember being in a store with my friend when we finally started talking about menopause, and we were both having a really stressful day. Like our families were just really stressing us out. Our personal lives were really stressful. We're going through the store. I'm stressed about what we're doing. She's stressed about something else. And it was like hitting us like she'd get one and she'd be like, oh, you know, and I'd be like, it's okay, just take a deep breath, you know, and we keep going. Then I'd have one, my phone would go off and I'd be like, oh, I didn't realize that stress could bring on hot flashes. But that's my trigger. The minute I get stressed and start getting all up in my head and start doing the round thinking, hot flash. And I'm like, okay, I just need to breathe and stop that, you know, stop, pray, breathe.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that Elena and I, when we were talking about, like, are we going to do this? Are we going to record ourselves talking about this? Which Elena isn't embarrassed, but I have to just keep telling myself I'm not embarrassed because, like, secretly but we were like, we need to be like really, really real. And so like Elena and I were saying, and we also want to talk about like things that work. You know, we can't talk about everything in one episode, but if people like this, please comment, tell us you want us to keep on doing it, and we will. But definitely, okay, so a whole bunch of things actually that you guys have said today, plus I watched this webinar this morning before I got on the call. I'm like, oh, that's why praying and like trying to calm myself down and like ask God for peace and stuff, that's why some of these things work, because I didn't realize how many things were connected. The doctor had told me stress will make the hormones worse, but I think that was the entire sentence, and I didn't realize until Elena said that it might be some specific things like stress can bring on a hot flash, and that I never saw that. Anyway, so yeah, we just wanted
There's
to talk
other things, you know, sometimes like my friends have said drinking red wine or any kind of alcohol is bothersome to them now, and that'll bring on hot flashes, so they don't drink anymore because they can't, you know, it just set them off so badly, you know. Different things they eat that'll do it too. But stress is definitely a huge thing with menopause. I don't think people realize.
I will say, in case anybody's like, but I don't want to give up I don't drink that much, but I do like the taste of various alcoholic beverages. So I was very sad to give up red wine. I have had like 2 glasses in the last year or 2 because it's just a terrible hot
red wine is a big culprit.
But I will say, for me, in case anybody's like, well, I'm looking for another like, you know, nice cool drink, gin and tonic, especially with
absolutely,
that does not bring on a hot flash for me. So
no,
I'm not a big drinker, and I usually only drink on vacation. But a Moscow Mule was just very refreshing. It's got like ginger beer and mint, and it's very light and refreshing. If I'm going to have anything, I'll have that. Because it does not.
Aperol spritz. Aperol spritzes are good too.
Somebody gave me some of that for my birthday, and I've only had one, but I should have another one because we've
Yeah.
had summer in Sweden for like, I don't know, at least
Yeah.
a week now.
Yeah.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to add anything to our conversation, but please feel free if you want to. And the point, I had two things that I wanted to do. Like my little target was I wanted to talk to writers about this because that's who I am. It's who I consider my identity and everything, and it's what my business is and everything. But also I wanted to open up. I wanted people to be able to watch this with any brain fog, long COVID, chemo brain, anything, and just feel like, you're not alone. And there are things that you can do, even if they're little things or big things. Like Elena went off of sugar, I think, entirely or nearly or something like that.
Yeah, I mean,
Caffeine's
for
bad.
me,
Caffeine's
actually,
bad too.
yeah, I'm still on caffeine. I can't give it up.
I can't give it up either, but I did give it up for a little while, and it did help when I did give it up, but it was too hard to keep off it, so I went back.
I drink only in the morning. I don't drink it
Yeah.
past like 10 in the morning usually.
Yeah.
But sugar really helped. Getting rid of sugar and lowering my carbs was really helpful. Helped my brain fog a lot, although I still have that on and off. But I think stress plays a big part in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think diet's a big player.
Yeah.
And on this webinar I just watched, her name is Dr. Teo D. So it's Tayo is her first name and Dee is her last name, and she's in London or somewhere in the UK. She and I met at in a business thing that we were both in, and she had this pretty big list, and a lot of it is like the health things that people always tell you these are the ways to be healthier. But one of the things that never occurred to me is to try to go gluten-free and see how that could affect some of these issues.
Yeah, that's a tough one, but it probably would help. My daughter is gluten-free, and so she stayed with us last summer, so we basically, the house was pretty gluten-free. I did feel better. But you have to be careful with gluten-free stuff too, because gluten-free stuff has a lot of sugar to make up for the taste.
It does, yeah.
Read your labels.
Yeah, but gut health is involved in lots of things. They're only just scratching the surface on how things like prebiotics and probiotics are really helpful in healing the gut, and that helps your mood, and it helps your hormone levels, and it helps your weight and your blood sugar levels, and pretty much everything. So yeah, what you are what you eat, basically.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been following this lady, this Dr. Mel Haver, I think is her name. She does the Galveston diet. She talks a lot about making sure, that you have enough fiber in your diet as well.
Yeah.
Super important.
It is.
Margie, I have a question about something that may be a fad, but I've started noticing in Sweden, or at least in Malmö here. Several of my friends have been buying these kits to make your own kombucha.
Oh,
yeah, kombucha is very popular in Australia as well.
Is it good for gut health?
Well, yeah, it is, because it's fermented. So anything that's fermented, like things like kimchi, and sauerkraut and all of those sort of fermented things, are really good for your gut. And kombucha is a naturally fermented drink. For me personally, it tastes disgusting, so I don't really like it.
It's like drinking
have
vinegar.
Like different flavors and stuff, but there is a lot of people do like it. Because
I keep trying to drink it. I can't get past it.
Yeah. It's not the nicest. I mean, you can buy it in the supermarket here in about 20 different flavors. And
here too.
I find it tastes, it's got sort of a natural sweetness, but a lot of them, they put artificial sweeteners in them as well, which to try and make it taste better, I guess. But yeah, anything fermented is supposed to be very good for your gut. So Yeah.
I've only had the homemade ones, and probably 3 out of 4 I thought actually strangely tasted good. The
Yeah.
friend
I've never had a homemade one. I've only ever had a commercial
No, me
ones. Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So
Yeah, I've only drank it one time, and I actually liked it. Okay, I mean, it wasn't great, but it wasn't bad, and I was surprised because I thought it was
yeah.
because it was fermented, and I don't like things like kimchi or sauerkraut and
I was
things
just going
like
to
that.
ask you because you lived in Korea, so I thought maybe you did like it.
What is interesting with the kimchi is I ate at a cafeteria at the school where I was teaching, and they were always trying to give it to me, and so I'd eat it sometimes just to be polite. And there was this one time I had this cold and he was giving me kimchi, and I'm like, oh, I don't really want this. Yes, 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 you need it. You need it. I ate it and it tasted good.
Yeah,
There you go.
I'm like, okay, well, that's my body telling me I need it. I guess, so.
You needed it. So
Yep.
it tasted okay when you need it.
Yep.
Did your cold get better?
Huh?
Did your cold get better?
Yes, it did.
Well, there you go.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been sitting here thinking, I told Kitty I felt a little bit like a fraud because I didn't really have major menopause symptoms, but as I'm sitting here thinking, I did, but it didn't surprise me because my mom had talked about it. And
Mm.
so I knew it was coming. So I think in the back of my mind, it was like, okay, well, this is just normal life. And so it didn't dawn on me that this is menopause, because I didn't have huge hot flashes. I had them sometimes, but they weren't the kind where, you know, you just were sweating and really bad. I had a friend who said she didn't think she had menopause until she and her husband were out driving. They lived in Idaho. They were out driving in a cold winter night and both windows down, and she's still sweating, hanging out the window, trying to get cool.
Yeah.
I never had anything like that.
Yeah.
But my mom had talked about it. In fact, she was really glad there was an All in the Family episode that talked about it. And she said, well, finally, somebody's talking about it in public.
Yeah.
My mom used to talk about it, but she passed away like when I was so young that I didn't get to ask a lot of questions. But I remember her talking, they called it the change in my mom's generation, you know, and so that's what she called. I knew it was menopause, you know, and she talked about the hot flashes and stuff, but you know, she wasn't here as I got older, so I really didn't, you know, I was a kid, I didn't ask a lot of questions. And she went through it pretty early, like she was in her 40s, early 40s. I really didn't start having symptoms until like really, you know, not great stuff until like my late 40s. So I just, you know, and there were some of the things I don't think if she didn't talk about, like we were talking about the mood swings thing and stuff like that. But I did have one incident like that. My husband thought I was crazy. It was, we already moved to Tennessee and it was freezing cold outside. And I went outside and stood for like 20 minutes and it had to be, I mean, it's probably 20 degrees outside. And Kevin opens the sliding door and he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh my gosh, it just feels so good. And he's like, there's something wrong with you. You need to go to the doctor. It was like, you're going to get frostbite. I'm like, no, literally you could probably see steam coming off me right now. Like it feels so good out here. And I'm not a cold weather person. I don't like it. Like, I don't like cold weather. I don't care. It doesn't bother me at all. But before I didn't like cold weather at all. So he's looking at me like she's lost her mind.
Yeah.
She's just really wrong with her. Like this is not her.
Yeah, 33 years of marriage, and 30 of them, I was always cold, and John was saying that it was too hot in here or whatever. And the last couple of years, I'm like, oh my gosh. And he's putting on a coat, or he checks the weather, goes outside. He's like, oh, it's definitely jacket weather. I'm like, holy crap, what are you thinking? It's totally not jacket weather. You know?
Yeah, poor Kevin, he has to like, you know, bundle up at night because I've cranked the air down. And I'm like, I put a whole bunch of blankets on the bed. I'm like, honey, you're just gonna have to bundle up. I just cannot deal. Like, I cannot sleep like this, you know. And he's like, okay.
For somebody who lives in the right country and has the wherewithal to buy this, I just heard, and it was in a different context, but I'm almost positive it was on Mark Dawson's self-publishing formula podcast, that James and Mark were talking at the beginning or ending, whatever they talk at the beginning and ending of the interviews, about something. I think it was like a mattress topper, but I'm not sure, that Mark bought, that you can set a temperature. Yeah, for each side. And so I can't remember what he said, but I was thinking, oh my gosh, I could set mine really cold and I could sleep well, and John could warm his side. So if anybody knows what that is, it's something to consider maybe.
I've seen the commercials for that. I'm afraid to look too closely because I'll want to spend the money to go buy one, but
yeah, I figure it's probably like $1,000 or $2,000 US or something.
Sure, it's expensive. Yeah.
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 Well,
sure.
okay. I personally am so grateful that, you know, we're talking, and because I don't have very many answers yet. I'm still just trying to get through it. And I'm struggling with, well, I shouldn't be doing this when I'm not even getting my writing done. But I'm like, well, maybe somehow this will help me and other people. And I don't want people to quit, because I just have heard of too many people who are quitting, whether it's for now or for always, because they can't think, or it's not fun, or they're frustrated. And I just don't want to be frustrated, and I don't want to quit. And I'm trying to use, like, you know, all the mental techniques that we've been learning a lot more of in the last couple of years. But when somebody said to me, a woman who's just younger than me and she doesn't know, she said to me recently, well, can't you just use that mental technique and just convince yourself you don't have menopause and you don't have these hormone issues? Thank you for laughing, nurse, because I was like, okay,
I'm sorry.
maybe, but I'm pretty sure not. So when a nurse just laughed, I'm just like, thank goodness I'm not the one who's I'm like, okay, you don't understand, but that's okay.
Listen, the hormones are driving. The hormones are driving the bus. The hormones are driving the bus. We are not driving the bus.
Yeah.
So
you have no control. That's what I said before. That's the worst thing about it, is that you don't feel like you've got any control of your body. And so for somebody to say that, you know, just convince yourself that you don't have it. I mean, obviously they've never been through it and they don't know what it's like. So.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, I will say one more time that, you know, I wake up in the morning, and this morning, for instance, and I'm just so tired, you know, I'm tired all the time. Now, granted, part of that is that I'm training to run a half marathon in a week, but still, it's kind of just weird. Like, all the symptoms just feel weird. They feel like not kitty. And so this morning I was thinking, my first thought was how much I just wanted to stay in bed for like a week. And another part of my brain was just like, joy, think about joy. And it did help me to keep the spiral from going further down. So I do want to say that does help.
The flip side of that, though, is what helped me is not pretending like I didn't have it. It was more like, listen, this, while it's real, you know, it's okay, because it's the hormones. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. This is just something you're going through. So, you know, I could mentally take a step back a lot of times and just be like, okay, I'm just gonna, like, when I'd say it, I just start crying. I'd be like, okay, well, you know, there's no real reason for it. I'm just gonna, you know, get through it and it'll be okay. You know, knowing that that's what it is, I think for me was so much. It's so helpful. You know, knowing that's what it is. It's not like I've you know, gone off the rails and lost my mind. It's hormones. You know, so I can, you know, at least acknowledge that and know that it's not permanent. You know.
Yeah.
All right. Does anybody have any last thoughts? And we'll come back to this in a couple of weeks, as soon as every time Elena and I can like get our schedules to match. So any last thoughts? I don't want to cut anybody off if they are like, I just wanted to say this one more thing.
One thing I did think of, if there were more medical people actually explaining what's going on in the body, how the hormones and what affects the different hormones, then we'd be able to offset. And I mean, I honestly think that may be part of the reason why some people have milder symptoms, and there's something that we're doing or something that is in our environment that is not affecting it exactly the same. But I don't know that because I'm not a medical professional, but I have discovered that in other areas when I was trying to keep my blood sugar down. And once I learned what exactly was happening in my body, it was easy to, you know, it became easy. And same thing with trying to limit, I've got fatty liver and trying to limit that. Once I knew what was actually happening, even though I may not have seen a physical response right away, I knew doing this thing was helping and did.
Yep.
And if there were that kind of information readily available, it might be a little easier. Oh, I have these symptoms that are worse because of this. We have to find it by trial and error. Like, oh, when I have a red flash when I drink red wine. Well, you know, some people may have it 5 hours after they drink red wine and don't connect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my thought. If there were actually a little more education, so we actually knew what was happening in our bodies, there might be, and there might be less.
My favorite is they tell you, well, just lower the stress in your life.
Okay,
Yeah.
how? And what
I'll
is
get
stress?
right on that.
See, we
Let
think
me
of
just take
stress
care of
as
that.
being upset about stuff, but stress is anything new that happens to you, whether it's good or bad. That's raising the stress level. So what does that mean? Yes. How do you lower the stress?
As soon as they say that, that makes your stress levels go up.
Yes.
Let me just put that in my to-do list today, and I'll just check that right off.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
really
a lot of
appreciate. Sorry.
I think a lot of what Stephanie is saying is probably wrapped up in the fact that a lot of people, as you said at the start, Kitty, don't want to talk about menopause, but also too, there's this perception that, oh, well, you just got to get through it and you just got to get over it. So therefore, in even doctors, especially male, middle-aged white doctors, won't even talk about what's happening in your body when it's just, oh, that's just menopause. Like that's a big catch-all and that explains everything. But, you know, as Stephanie says, if you know what's causing all the symptoms, then there might be some things you can do to mitigate them. So
I remember one of my doctors in California saying to me, and he was a young guy, young Indian doctor, and said to me, well, you're in perimenopause. Do you want to go on hormones? And I was like, I don't even know what that means. Like, I don't even know what is that going to, he's like, well, you can go on hormones or you cannot go on hormones. He's like, you've got at least 5 years left. So just let me know. I was like,
without any explanation.
Thanks.
Yeah.
And I just feel like even for all the things that mothers maybe didn't talk about 40 years ago, when I was 15, at least I knew the craziness in my head is hormones. That's what everybody says. And everybody knows it. The girls know it. The boys know it. The teachers know it. But I feel like you don't know that your spouse is going through this. You don't know your coworkers going through this. So like, we can't just pretend it's not happening, because even 15-year-olds have better ways of coping with their changes than I feel like I have. So
Yeah.
So we're gonna turn it around. We're gonna turn the ship around. All right. So leave a comment in the chat function, and this will be on YouTube, and I don't know if we'll find other places to put it, and let us know if it was helpful. If you have helpful thoughts or advice, we were a little bit worried about trolls just coming in and being weird and stupid. If you write a weird, stupid comment, then we'll delete it. But if you want more of these videos, let us know. We'll let you know when it'll be live. You can join us if you like. We're currently thinking that maybe we'll just limit the live version to having women on, even though I think it's really, really helpful for men to understand what's going on, because my husband probably would have liked understanding what was going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then we'll be back in a couple of weeks. All right, cool. Thanks. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Bye,
Nice
everyone.
meeting you guys.